It's being reported that the Trump administration lost an additional 1,500 kids. These are migrant children who illegally entered the United States alone this year and were placed with sponsors after leaving federal shelters. So according to congressional findings released yesterday, now the revelation echoes an admission in April where the Department of Health and Human Services found that the government had similarly lost track of an additional 1,475 migrant children that it had moved out of shelters last year. So, look, we've already lost 3,000 kids. Now, Senate investigators said the department could not determine with certainty the whereabouts of 1,488 out of 11,254 children the agency had placed with sponsors in 2018, based on follow-up calls from April 1st to June 30th. Again, we have lost 3,000 children. Bang up job, guys. Wonderful. Nice work. Now, the problem with this, other than just losing the kids, is there is a lot of concern that these kids will end up with human traffickers or used as laborers by people that pose as their relatives, as has happened before. Since 2016, officials at the Department of Health and Human Services have called on sponsors to check on children 30 days after they were placed there. But the department has also said it was not legally responsible for those children after they were released from the custody of its Office of Refugee Resettlement. Caitlin Oakley, spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services, offered a response to these findings, and she said, as communicated to members of Congress multiple times, these children are not lost. Their sponsors, who are usually parents or family members in all cases, have been vetted for criminality and ability to provide for them, simply did not respond or could not be reached when this voluntary call was made. Oh, they're not lost. Oh no, we just don't know where they're at. But wait a minute, that's kind of the definition of lost. You don't know where they're at. Yes, you know you've placed them with certain people, with certain families that you say you've done background checks on, but now you can't reach them, therefore they are lost. And speaking of, how do you lose 3,000 kids? Again, all we want to do is we just want to know that these kids are actually safe, that they're not in places where they can be exploited or be trafficked. If we don't know where they're at, we can't actually make sure that they're not still in those that they're still not in those situations. Because again, you never know. Now, the findings were also accompanied by legislation introduced on Tuesday by Republican and Democratic senators to clarify the department's responsibility for ensuring the safety of migrant children, even when they're no longer in custody. So this is bipartisan legislation. Now, what would it actually do? Well, it would require officials at the Department of Health and Human Services to run background checks before placing children with sponsors. It would also compel the department to make sure the sponsors provide care for the children in their custody, including making sure that they appear at their immigration court hearings. Look, over 80% of all the people that are, come in for asylum show up to their immigration hearings. That's what these unaccompanied children are actually doing. They get sent up here by their parents, because their parents oftentimes are unable to come with them, to escape violence and rampant poverty. And they come here to try to get asylum. So, most of them, if not all of them, end up going to their hearings. So, but of course, in the legislation, that's something that Republicans built in because they want to make sure the kids show up. Well, yeah, they're going to show up. And you know what? It is good to make sure. If only there was just some better way to track these kids. Or if they actually tried to track these kids. Weird. But anyway, additionally, the legislation would require department officials to notify state governments before migrant children are placed with sponsors in those states, and would increase the number of immigration court judges to help the Justice Department process cases more efficiently. I actually agree with that. I don't see really anything all that bad with this piece of legislation, it seems fine. Now, some of you might ask, well, why do we need this? Well, it's because we've had incidences of migrant children being trafficked. In a report 2 years ago, the Senate subcommittee detailed how department officials had mistakenly placed 8 children with human traffickers who forced them to work on an egg farm in Marion, Ohio. The report found that department officials had failed to establish procedures, including sufficient background checks and following up with sponsors to protect the children who were traveling alone. Now, not following up with the sponsors. Well, they tried to follow up with the sponsors and they couldn't find them. So apparently they need to continue following up. They need to continue to, I don't know, find these children. Now, look, this is a very complex issue, right? I mean, what do you do with the thousands of unaccompanied minors who came here to escape terrible conditions in their home countries? It's not an easy problem to solve, and we've got to we've got to find places to place them, obviously, and a lot of those children have been placed, 11,000 of them at least. But we also need to make sure that we know where they're at for their own safety. I mean, this is a real crisis, and we actually need a government that can, I don't know, do its job in protecting these kids. I don't know necessarily how we should go about tracking them in some ways, but I'm sure there are ways for us to be able to do so, to make sure that, again, they don't end up in the hands of traffickers or people that are intending to do them harm. And of course, maybe I'm probably going to get responses of why should we? I mean, why is it our problem? Why do we have to take the kids in to begin with? Well, if a homeless kid shows up at your door, what are you going to do? You going to slam the door in his face, or are you going to find some way to actually help them get into a home? That's the situation that we're in. So I'm just saying, it's not an easy situation. We've got to find a way to track these kids so that we know they're going to places that they should, and try to find some way to, of course, keep them safe out of the hands of traffickers. And right now, the government is doing a terrible, terrible job of doing that. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.